So we're almost there into making an amazing modern Node.js package with a binary and library written with the latest syntax using imports and tested and documented using a really simple stack, really simple but effective, because as I said, the whole point of using Node tools is that you get really small number of dependencies in your Node modules, because Zoroaster has got like 4 dependencies, including idle mode, and then documentary as well. It's got like a few dependencies in here, so overall there is no black hole for Node modules. But as I said, I've installed a usually and Ogify, which would otherwise lead to 2 new dependencies in them when the package is being installed, and we want to avoid that, because the less dependencies the better, because when the person sees 0 dependencies, they will automatically install your package, because nobody likes dependencies. Nobody wants to have many dependencies. And also they don't want you to hiding your dependencies as well by like creating bundles and stuff like that. So instead of bundling all these packages together, we're gonna compile it using Google Closure Compiler. And I promise you, this is the first time you will ever see somebody doing that, because this is the most innovative way to compile packages. And we're gonna go ahead and then I'm gonna create a new compile folder. In the compile folder, we're gonna have we're gonna have a bin as well. Yeah, it's okay. So basically, we can compile both binary and the source code as well. So just for the sake of it, I'm gonna show you how to compile the source code as well. Because here we can actually just use the build and all these files, because we're not relying on any other dependencies. But if there were other dependencies, it's also possible to compile the lib and API, not just the binary. But to achieve the result that I want, I need a package called Depack. And I've just released version 1 on the last week. It's been a huge milestone, because Node.js packages now can be compiled with Depack, because it's got this really interesting way of adapting modules for Google Closure Compiler, because usually the Closure Compiler is just for the JavaScript. So when you have like the Node API, like FS and path, the Closure Compiler cannot deal with that, but using Depack you can do that easily. So also I need to create a new job called compile, and I'm gonna call Depack on the source bin drop CSS, and there I want it basically to compile, so I need -c. Otherwise you can also create bundles for the web, and that's not compiling, that's like bundling. So you would not use a flag for that, but it can also compile like JSX syntax as well, and it's got like 2 dependencies, externs and this Node.js package, which contains it's got this mocks of modules for Node.js, which are required to use the Closure Compiler. And then I'm gonna say -a advanced, so that's triggering, not me, is triggering the compiler to do the to rename the variables into something very short, like A, B, C, and stuff like that. So we want advanced, we want the output into compile bin. Alright, so that should be what we need to do for the binary. So let's try to compile, and then the closure compiler is actually doing the type checking. So, oh my gosh, I think we've done something wrong. Does not have an export and is export default function. Okay, so I don't even know how I have everything working. Okay, I really don't know how. Why we were not using ANF or something. Maybe we just didn't have tests for that, so I assumed that worked, but obviously didn't. So just say is ANF from ANF and try that again. Doesn't know some variables, for example, the config file, and also yeah, we don't need to pass the extra variable in here, so that can go. But basically in here, you know how we created types previously, we need to use something called externs, and the externs is the way to define types for the closure compiler. So in our types we have just types, which basically is for VS Code. So from other packages I could basically import types from here, like config. But externs as well, we need to create externs for our compiler. The externs we do with the yarn d, and remember how we used to run d1, but then there's also d. There's also externs, and then that creates a namespace, and then in the namespace it creates this config property, and then which is defined using the type def, and it uses the closure notation for that. So actually when we compile the package now, we have to pass some externs as well. So types externs.js. This is not actually needed because right now, because we're creating a binary which is going to be executed, but we're not creating a library, therefore it doesn't, the externs doesn't actually matter at this point, but I will show you where they matter in a second when we're going to be compiling them. The library. So yeah, I think of the HTML is saying that there should be strings, but it's thinking that the file sync is actually it can be a buffer. Therefore, and CSS it doesn't even know what CSS is. So we can help the compiler and say that it's a string by casting it to the string. So that's pretty much the same as in Java. It's sort of similar, I think, because the closure compiler itself is written in Java, and a lot of people at Google work with Java, so you get such concepts as nullable types. Like if you say string, this is a string which can be null, which in Java is kind of important, but not so in Node or like in JavaScript. But you have to be careful with types. So I think maybe now we can compile, but because should drop it can be undefined, right? So because we didn't pass should drop, so that's helpful. And it's not even a boolean, so in our types, should drop is not a boolean, okay? It's a function actually, and the function can be specified with fn. I think we can make this type a record as well. Should drop, and then it accepts them argument by the name of selector, I think, and its type is string. This selector, yeah, arg string, the selector to check. And it's also optional. So if I try these types again, then where are they? Yeah, where they here. So in this one, it's generating then the types for VS Code, but this actually doesn't have to be. It could be namespace. So if I change that to namespace, yeah, it's almost the same, but yeah, I wanted to do different beyond title. Minus help. We want to use this thing called use namespace. So for the D1, actually, I'm just separating these two jobs. One in the source where it inserts the documentation into source, and another one is inserting it into types. But I want to show. Let's see here how it's changed now to VS Code notation using the nicer syntax because we using Clojure, it doesn't understand this VS Code stuff, and then it should return. So I mean there is different syntax, and by generating types with arrow functions, we can get a nicer documentation for VS Code, but Clojure does not understand that, so we need to have a different types, like they need to be defined differently for Clojure compiler. This is not used by Clojure. Clojure never gets access to this. What is used by Clojure is this externs. And now, because I changed the type to the record, it's not like it used to be. It's each property has got a new line because it's just easier to document it this way. And then I've got this type function here as well, but function can be also undefined. Yeah, we need to return boolean as well, so I think maybe now, see how it's done type checking as well, so we don't need anything like TypeScript, it's different, just another tool, right? So, yeah, nice, and we've compiled our program into compile being drop.css. And let's inserted this fs import and then put all the code together right into one file. So that's the, you know how Leonia, he used rollup, but I don't use rollup for packages. I use Depack and Clojure compiler because it creates a nice build on a single file, and you know, it's got this, it creates an executable file, and then it mangles the variable names as well and optimizes the code, so you can, for example, sell your program because it's obfuscated and nobody can get access to that. But I mean, we all do open source anyway, but you know, sometimes you might want to supply this to a client without having to reveal the source code. So how do we know it's actually working? Maybe if we do compile bin drop CSS and then try it, help and stuff. Yeah, but see how now, because we used to have a test build job in here, we can also do a test compile. Yeah, we can do test compile, but this is not gonna work. We need to go into context and change it also from for the special environment testing compile bin and when we test build, when we test compile, we only do there is only a single test. I mean, we use the mask test for bins, so yarn t test mask bin, and then it's gonna use the mode env test compile, and then when it goes into context, and it's gonna supply the compile bin drop CSS path to the binary. Test mask bin something, no, test mask bin JS. Okay, so now we know that the compile binary is working alright as well, which is really good. Okay, halfway there through compilation process, and it's put all the dependencies in there, so it's taking the usually and argified dependencies and it's put that into that single file and combined them into the single file, and it's using the 2008 standards, so it's got all the like destructuring and stuff, but I could target the lower Node version or like JavaScript version, and then it would produce output which I could run in like Node 6 or Node 4 for whatever reason there is. But yeah, that's a really cool way to create like zero dependencies packages using Clojure compiler, because this compiler is it comes from Google as well. It's like actively maintained. There are always like new versions coming, but what they've done, they've actually like broken the compilation in the most recent version in the November release. So I'm using the September one because they don't know like anybody's even using compiler for this sort of stuff, so they just assume that people who use Clojure library do that compilation, but it's not true. They just say, oh, you can't use compilation without the Google namespace. But it's not fair. Like, there's people who use that for different purposes, and yeah, they're gonna fix that in the next release, I hope. But not only can we create the binary file, we can also create the library. So if I go to the source, and then I usually call this file depack.js, then in here I need to import my drop CSS from just the index one, and then actually assign it to the module.experts. Yeah, I could assign to the experts itself, but imagine if we had more imports, then I just needed to show that you need to use the like expert and put the property name in the quotation mark. Otherwise the compiler would rename that, but then we want to compile that file into, so that's compiling binary. Let's compile library, so let's say lib, and then for that we're going to point the input is going to be source Depack. We're still compiling with advanced optimization, but the output is going to be compile drop css.js externs we also need, but for example let's remove externs for the second. And see what happens without extends. And it says it doesn't know about this variable drop css.config, but it's created the drop css. However, if we're going to be calling it from the libraries module expert, drop css has got this function and it's accepting the options, but however all options that are renamed into these short variable names like G or I or D, but we cannot use that library if we publish that, because when people supply options they are not meaningful in this program. Therefore we need to put back the externs, so when the compiler sees that this object is of type config and then its properties are in externs, it's not gonna mangle them, it's not gonna rename them into the short names like G and I, and it's renaming it because of advanced compilation. So if we go back, see here we now got 8.html.shouldDrop and .css, which is the correct version of the program. Yeah, it's still got this shebang, but it doesn't matter because I just used to compile that for binaries, but I started to compile libraries with Depack as well, and I don't see any problem with that. Like, it can be removed, but it's okay. So what else? But this is not enough, because in this file we lost all our documentation, so it's pretty much the same as if I just used this original package drop CSS, because the original didn't have like any help documentation wise. It didn't have the auto-completion tips, and it didn't have the JSDoc for descriptions. But however, this is like a very important part of your program. Like all the developers nowadays, they're writing JSDocs for their program, and when we compile the build and you know, that's fine for us there, because it's got this documentation copied across from the source, which were already prepared with typo as well. However, when the package was built, it all got lost because the comments are stripped. Yeah, so we need to make sure that it's there as well. So the way to do that is by creating a template, and the template is basically when you require the compiled functions from the output of Depack. See how it's got this weird thing here? Yeah, our output is not outputting set as well, cells as the property, it's outputting f, which we need to fix as well. It's outputting .css because there is somewhere internally in the closure compiler it knows that, like in HTML there is .css property, therefore it plays it safe, it thinks it might be this CSS property that doesn't need to be renamed, so it keeps CSS. However, there is no cells property, therefore it renamed it to f, and we don't get access to the A, to the options as well. Therefore we need to say function drop CSS. just need to create a proxy, and this one is our config or opts, and here we return drop.css opts. But now what we want to do is to say that this is a method type of type drop.css dot. So it was config and then assigned to experts. Cool. Now, because this is a template, we need to build this template. So I'm going to create another job called template. I'm going to say typo. Somehow template comes the input for yes, minus t template.js, and the types themselves are from types directory, and the output is actually, the input is compile template and the output is compile index.js. Try that. Error reading XML. Right, because template, because we put the arguments in there as well. So we only want the types index.xml. No, we want the API, not index. Yeah, we want the API. Okay, how to do that? Maybe there should be. I should be updating. Okay, so the problem is that I don't know what the hell the problem is. Okay, it's not even config, it's because it's definitely not config, it's just our drop.css in the API, and we have this method named APIs because I got confused, because in the template we also need to put the same stuff that we put in the source. So in the source, you know, we've got this index, yeah, we've got this typo thing in here, so we need to have that in the template as well, because we want to compile that thing. So can say that namespace, and also now in package in our D2 we also want to put compile index.js. This is after we run our template. We have to run the D2 as well. So in the template, it doesn't even have to have these things in here, because we're gonna, from the template, we're generating index file, and then using another job in the index, we're putting this documentation in there, and it updates it in there. It updates it for the method as well. Alright, so it's good, but also you know how we forgot, if we run our test now, and then it's also then perfectly documented package. So see how it's got the return type, actually set any, it should be set string, but I've never documented sets actually, so I'm not sure how. Set string, yeah, you can do that. I'm not sure if Clojure is going to be happy with that or not, but let's go back to the types. In the API and update that to set string. Yeah, I think it should be fine with that. Like, because arrays, you usually write array string, so set string should be acceptable as well. So we need to create another extern type record and return. And say this is the return type. Because we have our cell and CSS, so and we have to put the exclamation mark in front of it as well, because it cannot be null, right? Because all the types which are object, they can be nullable, but as soon as you put the exclamation mark, it makes them non-nullable. For the set, we're just gonna say the used selectors, and now we can use this return type because it's in the namespace drop CSS. We can also use it in the API, and then in the API the return type is drop CSS dot return. So compile our externs again, and the template. The build we're not even longer. We don't need it anymore. I've done something wrong with it. Drop CSS type record name return type record return type param prop. Yeah, I think I put param instead of prop. Drop prop. So now it's got the correct return type. But also we've updated the externs file in here, so it says that the drop CSS actually we should say in here as well that it should return And you know what? So we don't have to repeat it at this place. We don't have to repeat that. We need to use the type def and call import from compile and then just index file, and then what we want is the config and use namespace for that drop JSON.config, but then we need to suppress non-standard JSDoc. I hope this is right. Because this we need for closure, because closure doesn't understand the import statement. However, we want that just for VS Code. Yeah, docs, not doc. We need it for VS Code because now VS Code can import that type and it can see what's going on. So we don't even need our D2 types, our D1. We don't even need our D1 job. We can rename D2 into D1. And just get rid of that. It's not even that important. We just want to keep this config and return because it's just for our convenience. And here what I usually do is I say const, and this is our properties, equals ops, and then I get access to the documentation of this feature. I mean, I can see that is a string because we've destructured it from the options. And then our should drop becomes drop by default. Do not violate, just const, just use const. Can't be bothered to change everything, but yeah, so I know this is a string, so I can access all the completions on this thing. So let's try to compile again. I first compile and then do library because I think I might have done something wrong. But I think this is this all looks good. Yeah, it's fine. Now, because the externs are updated and in the package.json we don't actually have to pass externs like that. There's another way to do that, which is a bit nasty because we're already using this thing. So we can import types externs, but we have to change that file. And say this is a file overview and this is externs as well. So this is how the Clojure compiler is going to know that it's externs file. And because we required it, it's going to pick up all those externs. I hoped it would. Maybe like that. Types externs. File overview externs. It should be, yeah. So now we have yarn.d as well. And when somebody tries to use our package, they have last name, just say that our main is actually not built. We're gonna get rid of the build directory because we have compiled it. We don't actually need that. And we're gonna keep the module as well because we can require that from other packages. and then we can actually use the source code of this package to build it in other packages. That's why we want to keep module, and that's why we want to publish our source code as well. And we need to publish externs as well for that reason, right? So module, the binary, we need to add the binary here. And the binary is going to be called compile bin drop.js.js, and you always have to put the extension when you specify the binary. What we also can do is test compile. Yeah, now we're just going to get rid of the test build because we're not using build anymore, and we're going to get rid of B as well. Just compiling it and properly test everything yarn test. However, we would need to update the other mode into the this one source, and then say compile. But basically, if we were importing from any other place other than source, the index file in source, for example, lib.js, then it won't work because we've compiled it into one single package. So we just can test a single entry in there. There's nothing we can do about it. Test build will remove. So yeah, nice. Let's just try to compile it without externs and see what happens. Source Depack, yeah, forget externs. Oh no, yarn lib. So that's one. Once again, I've shown you already. It's going to change the config properties into something that it doesn't know about. And then if I try to test compile, that's failing everywhere. See, that's how useful the tests are. They're like the environments for different tests. Let's put that back. Compile. So we've got our build that we can delete. I don't think there's any need for the build. And then we've got bin, we've got our library, we've got our entry point with the documentation. We've got everything we need. So, for example, if I just created a test file and said import drop.js from this package, then here I get access to the documentation that we've created that is put in our API, and then we've got access to each property of the config and whether it's compulsory or not, and its type as well. CSS string should drop, yeah, and then we know what the type of the result is. So we have the CSS string and selectors as a set of string. So this is like 100% perfect documentation for ID. That's what everyone should be striving for as well, because that's how you achieve the developer experience. And just give you a sneak peek into what I want to do next is basically when you compile a package, I want to make sure that this documentation is present there as well, so you can write tests for your developer experience and auto-completion hints as well. So stay tuned, I will definitely show that later when I've made that sort of thing. But yeah, keep using Depack, and then happy days. Instead of two new dependencies with argue-find. Usually we've made a zero dependency build, and if we had like 10 packages, dependencies that we used, then that would be zero dependencies as well, and then people will be very happy to use that package. They open the npm page, they see zero dependencies, they install it. It's perfect, and it's optimized as well, using the latest technology. And documented. And another thing, because we've updated some types, right, we need to update the documentation as well, so we probably just need to write around yarn doc, adding some new types, but we're not referencing the build anywhere, we're just using the source files in the documentation. So we have tests to make sure the build works, but suppose some people might want to build to document the build as well and see that the build is working, maybe just somewhere else. Okay, so we're almost done. There's one little thing to do, and it is to write more documentation, so I'm gonna go ahead and commit that. Say compile bin and lead git push, go to GitHub, refresh. We should. And we've got our config, return type CSS cells. Nice. No, it's not exactly nice. What we need to do is to add actually in here we need to add the license, because this used to be MIT license, and we want to reference that package and its author. Using MIT license, and now when I compile it, the Clojure compiler should retain the license. But my own package, I think I'm actually going to release it under something else. I'm going to release it under AGPL. Yeah, there needs to be a proper assertion on the license, because when you release it with AGPL, then it's supposed to have cooperating. Okay, let's try ILM mode. There I have the full text. Yeah, I usually put that in the Depack thing. For the library, drop CSS. I actually called it drop CSS. I'm gonna rename the whole thing later. But remove unused CSS selectors based on HTML files. Yeah, it's gonna have this license, and then it's gonna have another license as well. But this for binary as well. We want to put that for the binary. It's gonna have his MIT license, and it's gonna have my AGPL license. See, I think I've retained the copyright notice. This is everything that I have to do for the MIT. And then I've got this a Pharaoh general public license as well. So we've asserted the copyright required. Like I don't bother putting it everywhere in the files because I don't see the need of it. But yeah, this is if anybody wants to use the package, they know what license it is. Actually, I didn't change the license in here. So you know, with the compiler now, we're not just dynamically linking packages, we're statically linking them as well. So that's like proper compilation. We need to think about the copyright notices in there as well, and how we use other people's packages as well. Because some people say, "Oh, I just read the JS file from the computer. It's not really inclusion in the compilation. It's not static or dynamic linking." But no, when you require a file, it's dynamic linking. Okay, that's what in the open source licensing terms, that's what it means, dynamic linking. When you do require a file, you're reading a function and then you're using it in your own like process. When you are creating a compiled file like this, you are statically linking the program because you're including the source code of the library into your program, and that becomes static linking. So the same rule as everywhere applies. Yeah, so we're almost done. Just a few more things.